Blood on the Bayous is supported in part by Dr. B.B. Trotter from Abilene, Texas, and the Fort Butler Foundation. Thank you.
I'm Don Frazier, and now we're going to take a look at the Civil War in Texas while we're discussing the Civil War in Louisiana and Texas and the Western Gulf. Well, the Federals figured that they had everything going their way by this point. Late 1862, they'd met with enough success that they were feeling fairly comfortable with their next steps, especially on the coast of Texas. They reported a very strong Unionist sympathy, especially in the city of Galveston. There were reinforcements coming to go ashore. In fact, there was already 300 men that had landed on Coons Wharf, 3 companies of the 42nd Massachusetts, and they had busily fortified their position to where it was pretty secure. One of the things that they did was build a drawbridge. Well, what they actually did is destroy the wharf as it connected to the island itself, but it left a single plank, almost like a drawbridge, that they could go back and forth on, but if the Confederates attacked, they could just kick that plank over, and then the Confederates would have to span a gap in the planking with water, underneath. So it was going to be a tough position to assail. Behind them, the 42nd Massachusetts had a pretty strong naval flotilla. 2 gunboats, the USS Westfield and Clifton, were up near Pelican Island, and they were looking north towards Houston and keeping an eye on the entire sweep of Galveston Bay heading that direction. USS Owasco, a 90-day gunboat, patrolled the mouth of Galveston Bay and looked out to sea. 2 smaller vessels, the schooner USS Corypheus and a small steamer, a power tow vessel, USS Sachem, operated right there in close proximity to Coons Wharf. But the real star of this flotilla was the USS Harriet Lane, an old revenue cutter. It was a sleek vessel. Everybody described it as beautiful, and it's also powerfully armed. It is all the way up the anchorage and keeping an eye on the bridges connecting the mainland to Galveston Island. Just they could actually put the causeway under fire if they needed to. The only problem was the water was dangerously shallow there. Now, there evolved an unusual circumstance in Galveston. The Federals did not have enough troops yet to actually control the city. So they would patrol by day, but every evening they would fall back to their fortified position at Coons Wharf, and that night the Confederates would come in and patrol. So no one really controlled Galveston, but they swapped ownership with the rising and setting of the sun. Well, what they did not realize was that the Confederates were even then on their way with a 4-vessel flotilla. Now, under the cover of darkness, on the night of December 31st, Confederate troops moved into Galveston as they always had. But this time it wasn't just random patrols, it was several regiments along with several batteries of artillery. They muffled the wheels so that observers, listeners, couldn't hear the creak and the roll of the wheels on the cobblestones. So they were trying to use stealth to get into position. They put the artillery sometimes on second stories or the second story of some of the buildings so they could fire down into the Union position. And the idea was that they would attack from the land, then the Confederate gunboats would attack from the sea. Well, before the Confederate land component was even in position, they looked out to sea and rockets went up, going skyward and signaling that somebody on those Union warships saw something. In fact, they had spotted the Confederate gunboats coming down. So USS Westfield and USS Clifton make steam and start heading up to go investigate these intruders. Almost immediately, Westfield goes aground. Crunch. And so it's immobilized. But their movement scared away the Confederate gunboats, and they disappeared back into the darkness. Well, there's no way to communicate the naval component with the land component. So the Confederates on Galveston Island just assumed the plan was still intact, and they opened fire. In fact, the first round was fired by General Magruder himself. He said, "Now that I have fired the shot, I have done my part as a private. Now I must attend my part as general." And very flamboyantly went off to his headquarters. Well, there's rounds busting into the fortifications there at Coons Wharf. They're tearing up the dock. They're tearing up the warehouse that's at the end of that dock. But they're really not doing a whole lot of deadly work against the Federals that are there. There's few casualties, but it's not in critical danger. The U.S. Navy, seeing what's going on, not threatened from the sea, recovers quickly and begins blasting the city of Galveston with naval grape shot. Anytime they have a clear line of fire down a street in Galveston, they send lots and lots of iron plowing down those streets. And they're starting to really make it hot for the Confederate infantry that are there. The Rebs are really getting plastered. So then they decide, all right, now we're going to rush Coons Wharf and we're going to capture that position. A storming party had been formed and given ladders. And they were told, all right, now run out there and put those ladders across that gap or put them down in the water and climb up the side of that wharf, and that's how you'll get to them. Well, that's a pretty desperate action. And when they took the ladders out there, they figured out, wait, the ladders are too short. So they drop the ladders and scurry back into the town and take cover. It looks as though this sort of harebrained Confederate attack is going to be a complete and total disaster. And right about that point, just a few minutes before sunrise, it's kind of a foggy, misty morning. Now there's all sorts of gunpowder smoke laying low in the mist. The Confederates are about to declare defeat, and lo and behold, what comes churning out of the fog in the mist are the Confederate gunboats, Neptune and Bayou City. Well, the Bayou City makes the first run, and their target is the Harriet Lane. So the Bayou City has the 5th Texas Cavalry aboard as sharpshooters and a boarding party, makes a run at the Bayou City and hits it, but really bounces off and heads around past the bow of the Harriet Lane and off towards the docks. Looks like it's taken its chance and missed. The Neptune comes next. Aboard the Neptune is the 7th Texas Cavalry, also in the role of sharpshooters and boarders. They too hit the Harriet Lane, boom, and glance off. But this time Harriet Lane puts a couple of rounds through the hull of the Neptune. She starts shipping water, and she is sinking. And Neptune heads towards the shallows, hopefully to where it'll sink in shallow water and be salvageable. Even as it's going down and water's coming across the main deck, the sharpshooters continue to pour rifle fire onto the decks of Harriet Lane, really suppressing the gun crews. Well, the Harriet Lane's now in a position where it's got to get away from this deadly small arms fire. So they begin maneuvering, trying to back the vessel away from the Neptune, and in the process, they run aground. What actually happened was a Confederate artillery round knocked the head off of what's called the cat head, which holds the anchor. And it dropped the anchor into the mud, so when Harriet Lane tried to back up, it kind of got to the end of its leash and went, dong, got hung up and then swung over into the mud. So now it's a sitting duck. It's all right, the 2 main Confederate attack vessels have been destroyed. Or have they? In fact, they have not. Bayou City, instead of being in a sinking condition, was really just kind of beat up a little bit. So they assess the damage, figure out, hey, this boat's still in the fight, turn back around, and this time they make a run on the other side of the Harriet Lane. And this time they ran right into her wheelhouse and jammed the wheel with the bow of the Bayou City. The Confederate boarders aboard this cottonclad make short work of anybody still standing on the deck of Harriet Lane. Infield, shotguns, and pistols clear the deck, and Harriet Lane is captured intact with only minor damage. Now, down towards the end of the island, the USS Owasco, commanded by Lieutenant John Guess, sees what's going on and says, wait, we cannot let that vessel fall into Confederate hands. So he runs his 90-day gunboat down the length of the docks there at Galveston, starting to fire at Harriet Lane to try to drive the Confederates off. pretty quickly he understands, wait, Harriet Lane's full of our guys. If I continue to fire, this is going to end up being a disaster for everybody involved. Also, he sees that he's being hailed with a white flag. So Guest pulls up short, and he watches as a rowboat containing Leon Smith comes out to parley. And Smith does something audacious. He tells the federal officers that he encounters, I want you to surrender the rest of these ships and that little infantry detachment on shore. The Federals say, wait. You're asking for a very bold statement. Our commander's over there at Pelican Island on the ship that's aground, and we need to consult with him first. And so they said, great, you've got about an hour. Go sort it out. Well, as the Federals get together and start talking, they're going, something's fishy here. How did these Confederates, who looked like they couldn't do anything right on the land side, manage this great stroke of good fortune against the Harriet Lane? How did they do it? And so people are looking through binoculars and telescopes and going, wait, is that an ironclad that rammed it? If you take a look at a cottonclad, it's kind of slab-sided and up high, and it's all dark. It kind of has the silhouette of a Confederate ironclad. And the federal officers go, wait, did they sneak an ironclad under construction in Houston, get it past all of our spies, and then send it down here to kind of work over our fleet? Well, they can't be sure, but they know that they can't afford to lose the entire flotilla. So the ships all run for it. They head out towards the mouth of Galveston Bay, past Galveston Island, and out into the Gulf of Mexico. Well, who's being left behind? That would be the 42nd Massachusetts. They're completely abandoned by their Navy counterpart. And the Westfield. The plan behind the Westfield was pretty simple. Can't get it off the sandbar. It's stuck. Don't have time, so we're just going to blow it up. So they set what's called a slow match. And the idea is we will set that slow match, and it will burn down into the magazine and blow up. But since it's a slow match, we'll have time to row the destruction party, the demolition party, out a safe distance, pick them up with a transport, and they'll get away. What happens, though, is they row out to the transport, get ready to go aboard. Commodore Renshaw says Westfield hadn't blown up. So he gets back in the boat with the crew to go and make sure it gets blown up this time. When he gets to the deck of the Westfield, it blows up. His pistol is later found blown about 3 miles into the interior of Galveston Island. So that was a big explosion. I'll say 3 miles, but it was blown clean out of Pelican Island all the way into town. So big explosion. Westfield's now burning and sinking. The Commodore Renshaw is dead. The ships have all gone out to the Gulf of Mexico. There's several supply vessels that are left to be captured by the Confederates. And the small Union infantry detachment in Galveston is also captured. Lieutenant Commander Richard L. Law of the Clifton is the senior ranking officer. And in essence, Renshaw, by self-destructing, leaves him holding the bag. And he ends up being sacked for what is justifiably described as a naval disaster. So just after daybreak, on the 1st of January, 1863, the flag of the Confederacy once again floated over the largest city in Texas, Galveston.